Hi Gemini, and welcome to your August 2024 horoscope. I'm just going to say it like it is. August is going to be quite difficult for all of us. And especially for you, Gemini, there is a square between Jupiter and Saturn. It's affecting all of us, but especially for you, it's happening in your angular houses. It's happening in your 1st and 10th house. So you are one of the 4 signs that might feel this especially strong and especially intense. The square happens on August 19th, and even though it's a bit later in the month, it is going to be an energy that will feel building up all the way up until the 19th. Because of that, let's start by talking about the square. Let's start talking about the square, even though it is happening later in the month and there are different aspects earlier, but I just want to get this square out of the way. So for you, Gemini, as I said, it's happening in your 1st house. Jupiter is in your 1st house and in your 10th house because Saturn is in your 10th house. The square between Jupiter and Saturn is representing a tension for all of us between a sense of optimism, a sense of hope, a sense of joy, versus a sense of realism, maybe even pessimism, a sense of feeling stuck, a feeling of needing patience and needing to put in some serious hard work. And specifically for you, Gemini, it might be that you are facing some blocks in your career. There might be some roadblocks that you're hitting that are making things difficult for you. You might feel like you need to work 10 times harder than you've ever had to with your career. And this might have an effect on your usually upbeat optimism about life. It might have a damper on the expressive, joyful part of you that you show up in the everyday world. And this might literally show up in the sense that you come off a little bit grumpy during August, or you might come off a little bit sad to others when you talk to them, or perhaps you might start. You might not take care of your physical appearance as much. You might wear clothes that are not as fun as they usually are, as expressive as they usually are. So all of this hard work and attention that your career is requiring from you might be taking away from the optimistic way that you carry yourself. But it's not just August 19th that you need to be aware of, Gemini. The whole week, all the way from the beginning of August 14th, there might be some major events happening leading up to the square with Jupiter and Saturn. So let's talk about that whole week. On August 14th, we have Mars, who is conjuncting Jupiter in your 1st house. A day later, it squares Saturn in your 10th house. The way I see this happening is that you do something courageous on August 14th. You face your fear, you do something that you're afraid of, because it's motivated by your optimism, motivated by this feeling that I know I got this, I know that things will turn out well, motivated by a sense of hope. However, just because a day later Mars squares Saturn, I don't think this courageous action will result in your desired outcome. The way this sort of speaks to me, this square with Saturn, is that you might reach a roadblock. Your action might not fall in the way you would expect it to. It might not lead to what you wanted it to lead to. And that can be quite hard, obviously. And you might feel like it especially affects your self-esteem and your self-confidence as well. Later in the week, on August 18th, Venus will oppose Saturn and square Jupiter. Venus is in your fourth house. So later in the week, you might feel that this lower self-confidence or self-esteem might be making it also more difficult for you to show up at your home. It might be more difficult for you to show up as your caring, nurturing self with your family. Maybe you might be finding it more difficult to take care of your home. Maybe the dishes are piling up or the laundry is piling up. And this is something that will happen a day before the Jupiter and Saturn square. So you can see how this whole week might progress and how things might build up to the story of what's happening on July 19th. Finally, we get to July 19th, the square between Jupiter and Saturn. And if you didn't think it could get any worse, I'm here to tell you that Jupiter and Saturn, the square, will happen on a full moon. So actually, not only do you have the tension of the square, but you also have the tension of the full moon. You have the sun and the moon opposing each other, and that will amplify the energy of Jupiter and Saturn. For you, Gemini, the full moon is happening in your ninth house of your ideals, of your values and beliefs. And because the moon is in Aquarius in your ninth house, you might especially feel that with this challenge that Saturn is presenting in your career, with this hard work that you have to put into your career, that you start to feel a bit like an outcast. You start to feel like your values and your beliefs are all of a sudden a mismatch with the community around you. You might feel like maybe they're even a mismatch for yourself, that you start to realize that what you thought were your values and your beliefs are not actually it, that maybe they are changing. Maybe you thought you valued being recognized at work and having a good position at your work. But perhaps this situation with the square, with Jupiter and Saturn, is making you rethink those. And as a result, is making you feel alone, is making you feel a bit like an outcast, or a bit like you're dealing with this all on your own. And honestly, I am sharing this with all of the zodiac signs. You are not alone. All of us on Earth are dealing with this square on August 19th. We're all dealing with this full moon that's making us feel like outcasts. And if you can sort of bring yourself to it, I would highly recommend to also open up to somebody so that you can also hear that they too are struggling with their own things, and that indeed you are not alone, even if it may feel like it. Let's go back a little bit and have a chat about Venus. We chatted about the fact that Venus will oppose Saturn, how this might have an effect on your self-esteem, and especially the loving nature that you have towards your family and your home. But as a matter of fact, Venus will have two other difficult aspects or tense aspects in the month of August. So this might feel like there is more of a difficulty with your confidence, with your self-esteem, with your loving nature. It might be difficult to express that in general during the month of August. So earlier in the month, Venus squares Uranus. Uranus is in your 12th house. So you might feel like there are some sudden things, some sudden changes that force you to spend a lot of time alone. It could very literally be the fact that your work is requiring a lot of time and attention, which is perhaps forcing you to be a bit more isolated, to spend time alone. working instead of being amongst others. And this might also especially impact your loving nature, your confidence, your love for yourself even. Later in the month, as actually at the end of the month, so after the Jupiter and Saturn square, Venus will also oppose Neptune. And you might especially find that at the end of the month, there are some sort of dreams that you realize are not realistic. You realize that they're illusions, they're not true, they're not grounded in anything, and that you might need to let them go. And for you especially, these are dreams when it comes to your career, ideas or hopes that you had of the wonderful contribution that you could bring to the rest of society. You might find that some of them start to fall away. You might find that some of them no longer seem realistic, possible, or maybe no longer seem like something that you even desire anymore, even if they are realistic. It might just be something that you realize you don't want anymore. All right, I promise. Those are all the challenging aspects of August. Before we close off the month, let's finish on a good note. Let's finish by chatting about the new moon, which will be happening on August 4th. This is actually a new moon happening in the sign of Leo. And it will be a fairly gentle and calm new moon. The new moon is happening in your 3rd house. And during the same time, we are going to have Mars and Jupiter in the sign of Gemini in your 1st house. So you might especially feel at the beginning of the month some good energy. You might feel more talkative, more expressive. You might feel like you're perhaps traveling quite a bit, local traveling, not long distance traveling. You might feel like you're spending a lot of time with your local community, getting involved in all sorts of things. You might feel a lot of energy, a lot of expressiveness in the way you present yourself. And you'll find that after the new moon, especially as we're approaching the square, that damper starts to come in. But at least at the beginning of the month, you do start off on a positive note. One thing that I can see happening here with both Leo and Gemini is a chance of overextending yourself, a chance of doing too many things, and doing things for recognition, doing things because you want to feel accepted, you want to feel like you belong. And you might find yourself in situations where you're like, oh, but I actually don't want to do this thing, or I actually don't want to be here, but I'm only here because I care what they think of me or because I want them to like me. So keep that in mind at the beginning of the month. Of course, getting that love and that sense of belonging might feel nice. You know, maybe you just need to get your reserves full so that the square later in the month will hopefully feel a bit easier. But again, just sharing that as a bit of a word of caution. And hopefully that helps you out during the new moon. So overall, Gemini, I know you got this. You are ready for what August has to bring your way. Don't be afraid if there's a little bit more hard work or some blocks that you're experiencing with your career this month. The astrology is showing that that's what's supposed to be happening. So I know that you got this. Keep in mind that the square will eventually pass and this tension will eventually feel easier. I hope that amongst all this chaos, you can still try and find a sense of hope or a sense of optimism or a sense of a lesson that you're learning. And yeah, thanks for joining me for this horoscope. I hope it helps you. I hope it provides some guidance for you for the month of August. And before you go, I wanted to let you know that I am doing a giveaway. When we reach 1,000 subscribers, one of you gets to win a free reading with me. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, Gemini, and I hope to see you again soon.